Wild West, leaving the towns I love the best. Thought I seen some ups and downs till I come into New York town. People going down to the ground, buildings going up to the sky.
In September 1960, a few months after dropping out of the University of Minnesota, 19-year-old Bob Dylan borrowed a copy of Bound for Glory, Woody Guthrie's 1943 autobiography. Inspired by Guthrie's near-mythical account, Dylan hit the road as a hitchhiking, folk-singing vagabond. He learned Woody's songs, affected his style, and even adopted his speech patterns. 5 days after he arrived in New York, in late January of 1961, Bob Dylan took a bus over the river. The bus passed through Newark and East Orange, dropping him near the Greystone Psychiatric Hospital in Morristown, New Jersey.
So one morning when the sun was warm, I rambled out of New York town. Pulled my cap down over my eyes and headed out for the western skies. So long, New York. Howdy, East Orange.
He'd come to meet Woody Guthrie. Woody was not celebrated in this place, Bob wrote years later in his memoir, Chronicles. It was a strange environment to meet anybody, least of all the true voice of the American spirit. Pete Seeger was not present at that meeting. At that point, when Bob was still fresh off the bus, he hadn't met Pete Seeger yet. Pete was friends with Woody Guthrie, going back decades. He regularly visited Woody at Greystone. But as best as we can tell, Dylan, Seeger, and Guthrie were never in the same room at the same time at Greystone or anywhere else. So that early pivotal scene in the movie A Complete Unknown is a fabricated set piece, a contrivance. We're leading up to a question here. Overall, is the new Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown, starring Timothée Chalamet and co-written and directed by James Mangold, is A Complete Unknown historically accurate? The answer, no, it isn't. Also, the answer, yes, it is. And the most correct answer, it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, just not in the way one might think.
Hey, hey, Woody Guthrie, I wrote you a song about a funny old world that's a coming along. Seems sick and it's hungry, it's a tired, it's torn. It looks like it's dying and it's hardly been born. Hey, hey, Woody Guthrie, but I know...
In 1999, the celebrated German film director Werner Herzog wrote the following, part of a half-funny, half-serious manifesto he called the Minnesota Declaration. I will refrain from a German accent. There are deeper strata of truth in cinema, and there is such a thing as poetic, ecstatic truth. It is mysterious and elusive, and can be reached only through fabrication and imagination and stylization. Herzog and others, but we like the way he put it, Herzog distinguishes between the accountant's truth and poetic truth. By poetic, ecstatic truth, Herzog means a form of truth that evokes emotion and understanding rather than simply conveying objective reality. Herzog believes, and we tend to agree, that raw facts alone fail to capture the fullness of a story. A deeper, poetic truth can be achieved with creative storytelling, and sometimes, a lot of times in film, that truth is arrived at by making stuff up. The broad strokes, but also the telling details. About halfway through A Complete Unknown, there's a classic piece of show-don't-tell exposition. James Mangold conveys the story of the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis by showing us how it might have looked at ground level. Ominous, incomplete snips of news on TVs and radios, urgent conversations about canned food and basement shelters. Joan Baez drags a suitcase down the eerie, empty streets of Greenwich Village. Taxis won't stop for anybody. Across the streets, small kids are hurried into a family car packed to the roof. A husband is on the corner payphone in a panic, telling his wife that he's trying to get to her. Joan hears a familiar voice ringing down the quiet street. She enters the Gaslight nightclub, and Bob is singing the final verse of Masters of War.
Thank you. Here's a new one. Come, your masters of war. You build the big guns. You build the death planes. You build all the bombs.
The crisis is averted. The sun comes out in the morning, and once again, Greenwich Village bustles with activity. A little more wary, a lot more jaded, but more or less back to normal. For now. None of this actually happened. But that doesn't matter. The larger poetic truth gets across in just a few powerful minutes of screen time. Okay, we've got a lot more to say about A Complete Unknown, and we'll do that right after some housekeeping and announcements.
You hide in your mansion of the young people's blood.
This podcast is intended to be education and commentary. It will discuss adult themes and may use coarse language. Pantheon Podcasts presents Rock and Roll Archaeology with host Christian Swain. Music, culture, technology, and rock and roll. And now, on with the show.
Welcome back, friends, to another RNRA short on Pantheon Media. I'm Christian Swain, and I am the rock and roll archaeologist, along with my comrades Jerry Danielson and Richard Evans, the three-headed monster. We wish you a safe and prosperous 2025. Visit us at rockandrollarchaeology.com. It's the mothership. Links to our socials, Patreon, and TeePublic pages, all kinds of podcast feeds, and more. Please stop by. Let us know you're there. We're happy subscribers and more than happy to plug the online archives Rocksback pages. So check this out. Here in the States, many public libraries and school libraries have an institutional subscription to RBP. That means if you have a library card, you have full access. Visit your library in person or online. Once again, rocksbackpages.com. Find your rock history rabbit hole and go down it right there. Now, we took our own crack at this very same story right here as part of our humble podcast endeavor. And I think we did a pretty solid job of it, if we may venture to be so bold. Episode 5 of Rock and Roll Archaeology is called The Ballad of Bob and J.R. In that chapter, we meet Pete Seeger, Bob Dylan, and Johnny Cash. We discuss the Dylan-Cash friendship, Bob's evolution from folk singer to rock and roll star, the Newport Folk Festival, and more. Another strong tie-in is episode 10, Roll Away the Stones. We talked about the history of the Delta Blues and its massive influence on rock and roll. We met Alan Lomax in that one, among others. So along with this short, there are a couple of more good podcast companions to A Complete Unknown. Please give them a listen or a re-listen on our website or your favorite podcast feed. Hey, let's do a quick ad break, and we'll come right back with the setup. All right, so let's get the IMDb stuff out of the way. A Complete Unknown from Searchlight Pictures went into general release on Christmas Day 2024. It's directed by James Mangold, who also directed Walk the Line, the Johnny Cash biopic from 2005. The screenplay, co-written by Mangold and Jay Cox, draws inspiration from Elijah Wald's 2015 book titled Dylan Goes Electric, Newport, Seeger, Dylan, and the Night That Split the 60s. We have a high opinion of Elijah Wald's writing. We leaned heavily on his work in our discussion of the Delta Blues back in episode 10. Jay Cox is a veteran music journalist turned screenwriter. We cite an important Time magazine article he wrote in our last big show, episode 26. Timothée Chalamet stars as Bob Dylan. Edward Norton plays Pete Seeger. Monica Barbero plays Joan Baez. All three actors sang for their respective roles. Elle Fanning plays Sylvia Russo, a fictional composite character inspired by Bob's Greenwich Village girlfriend, Suze Rodolo. Boyd Holbrook has a notable cameo appearance as Johnny Cash. Overall, we found it highly entertaining, 9 out of 10. Good story, great acting, and singing. So let's discuss it further. Friends, have another rock and roll archaeology short. This one is about the new Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown.
If you're traveling in the North Country Fair, where the winds hit heavy on the borderline, remember me to the one who lives there. For she once was a true love mine.
So with this short, we'll ask 3 questions about A Complete Unknown. First, the discussion with which we opened. Is the movie historically accurate? No, and yes, and it doesn't matter. It's not historically accurate on a granular level. But again, that's hardly the point. It's not a documentary. A Complete Unknown is mythical. It's meant to capture a certain magic, convey a poetic truth. And it does exactly that. Next, we want to ask, will A Complete Unknown reach and or create new fans? If someone goes into the theater not knowing much or even not liking much about Bob Dylan, will they come out 2.5 hours later with a newfound appreciation? Our answer is a resounding yes. That's where A Complete Unknown is a complete triumph. We'll unpack that further towards the end. One more question. How big a deal was the climactic event of the film, the '65 Newport Folk Festival, when Bob Dylan went electric? We'll tackle that one next. Here's the thing about Bob Dylan's Sunday night set at the '65 Newport Folk Festival. It's Rashomon. Talk to 10 different people who were there, all of them honest and observant, and you'll get 10 different stories. Elijah Wald did that with his book, Dylan Goes Electric. He pretty much talked to everybody at Newport '65 who was still around to talk about it 50 years later. For those who were no longer around, like Pete Seeger, who passed away in 2011 at the age of 94, Wald poured over letters, talked to relatives, read through archived interviews. The penultimate chapter of Dylan Goes Electric smash cuts through all these different perspectives. It's kind of dizzying to read, really, which is, of course, the point. Remarkably, though, Wald shows, these different perspectives bring it all back home. They all end up in the same place. No matter their vantage point, on stage, backstage, out in the crowd, everyone realized, either at the time or very quickly afterwards, that the ground had shifted. So, yes, it was a very big deal indeed. We said as much in our main show, but we're always happy to get some validation.
The festival was over and the boys were all planning for a ball. The cabaret was quiet except for the drilling in the wall. The curfew had been lifted and the gambling wheel shut down. Anyone with any sense had already left town. He was standing in the doorway looking like the Jack of Hearts.
For our last bit here, we want to talk about hearts and minds, and will A Complete Unknown win some of them over? Do we have some new Dylan converts? Sure looks like it. We're writing and producing this 2 weeks after release, and this movie's clearly got some legs. Ticket sales are strong, and the stars are out making the rounds to promote it. Oscar buzz is in the air. This past week, Terry Gross and the Fresh Air podcast ran a good piece about A Complete Unknown. They included archival interviews with Suze Rodolo, Joan Baez, and the session musician Al Cooper. Al's the guy who played that swirling organ part on Like a Rolling Stone. He deserves some love and recognition for that musical contribution. We were so glad to see that bit portrayed in the movie, too. How it kind of accidentally ended up in the final mix makes for a great story. We'll drop a link in the show notes. And we learned just today that Timothée Chalamet will host and will be the musical guest on Saturday Night Live, January 25th. We assume he'll be playing some Dylan songs. Unknown word yet on whether it will be an acoustic or an electric set. As always, with Dylan, or even with somebody portraying Dylan, expect the unexpected.
What was it you wanted? Tell me again so I'll know what's happening in there. What's going on in your show? What was it you wanted? Could you say it again? I'll be back in a minute. You can get it together by then.
In her 2008 memoir, A Freewheelin' Time, the late Suze Rodolo, she died in 2011 at the age of 67, Suze wrote, that might be her favorite Dylan song. Willie Nelson covered it in 1993, and it's a great version. The original is on the album Oh Mercy from 1989. Oh Mercy's one of several comeback albums Bob has released across the decades. It's a good one. We really do like that one. Seems like every time Bob hits a slow spot, gets written off a little bit, he puts out an album that reminds everybody he's still Bob fucking Dylan. We like that, too.
To me, this song is the essence of Bob Dylan. It showcases his acerbic wit and his ability to twist multiple meanings around his finger. The old songs from the early time of his life in which I participated are so recognizable, so naked, that I cannot listen to them easily. They bring back everything. There's nothing mysterious or shrouded with hidden meaning for me. They are raw, intense, and clear.
Raw, intense, and clear, wrote Suze in A Freewheelin' Time, a memoir of her time in Greenwich Village. We've cited this book a couple of times now, and it's a fine read. In Chronicles, Bob described those same early songs as dead straight, expressing powerful new realities. Take your pick.
Is the scenery changing? Am I getting it wrong? Is the whole thing going backwards? Are they playing our song? Where were you when it started? Do you want it for free? What was it you wanted? Are you talking to me?
At Bob Dylan's specific request for the movie, James Mangold and his team changed Suze Rodolo's name to Sylvie Rousseau and deliberately smudged some of her biography. Bob said Suze was a private person her whole life and that she didn't ask for any of this, is how Mangold recalled it. Oftentimes, we chafe at yet another big Hollywood movie portraying yet another woman as a mere reflection of the great man. But Mangold and the screenwriter Jay Cox pull off a neat little trick here, at least in our view. Sylvie, played by Elle Fanning, stands in as a proxy for the audience, experiencing Dylan's rise with a mix of admiration, fear, and frustration. She helps with that rise, even as she struggles to understand the man behind the myth. At Newport, Sylvie finally breaks up with him for good. Before leaving, she tells Bob she can't just be another spinning plate in his world. He doesn't want her to leave. Well, we don't want her to leave, but she has to. She'll lose herself if she stays. Ultimately, we end up rooting for her. We're in awe of Bob's talent and ambition, but we like Sylvie. It's a little sidestep by the writers, away from that hole behind every great man trope. Blend that emotion and storytelling with a ton of great music. There are like 60 different songs in the movie. Folk, rock, blues, and jazz. All kinds of stuff. Anyway, not hard to see why A Complete Unknown is a hit and why it's creating new Dylan fans. We're seeing a lot of social media takes from young adults. You know, I didn't know that much about Bob Dylan, but then my parents and I saw A Complete Unknown and... So again, mission accomplished. We love it. New Bob Dylan fans are incoming, and they're off to a nice start with A Complete Unknown.
Oh, God said to Abraham, kill me a son. Abe said, man, you must be putting me on. God said no, Abe said would. God said you could do what you want.
I'm Christian Swain, and I will see you somewhere out on Highway 61. Thanks for listening to Rock and Roll Archaeology on Pantheon Media. We'll catch you later. Peace out. Keep up the rockin'.
Where do you want this killing done? God said out on Highway 61. Well, Georgia Sam, he had a bloody nose.
Rock and Roll Archaeology is written by Richard Evans and Christian Swain. Produced and hosted by Christian Swain. All sound design and incidental music by Jerry Danielson at Busy Signal Studios. Find all of our shows, notes, and links at pantheonpodcast.com. All songs can be found for purchase or streaming wherever you get your great music. Please pick up these amazing tracks. Contact us on social at Pantheon Podcasts on Facebook and Instagram. Tweet us at Pantheon Pods.